Hi, this is Kenny Albert. You're listening to the Broadway Hat Podcast with your host, Kyle Hall, the number one podcast for all things Rangers hockey.
Well, welcome back to the Broadway Hat Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Hall, and what a week for the New York Rangers. It starts with the NHL Draft and Gabriel Perreault dropping to them at 23rd, to the 23rd pick for them. I love the selection. I know in our draft preview show, when Adam Kilman came on with us, I was talking about how much I love Perreault, and was there a possibility that he could drop to them, and he thought maybe, but would probably be gone before then. But what a great pick. As soon as he was still there, I was hoping that Chris Drury would run to the podium and announce his name, and that's what he did. And all in all, the Rangers had a solid draft for only having 5 draft picks. I also really like Drew Fortescue, the third-round pick, who we also talked about with Adam on the show. Talk about both those guys. So if you haven't heard of that interview yet with Adam, and also Byron Bader was on that show as well, make sure you go back and check that out because we have a great preview of Perreault and Fortescue. And actually, we have a great guest later on. Steve Kournianos, of the draft analyst, comes on and breaks down the entire draft for the Rangers. So we talk about not only the first-round pick of Perreault and the third-round pick of Fortescue, but also Larsson and the 2 6th-round picks here. So it's a great stuff from him, and stick around for that in a little bit. But also, on top of the NHL draft craziness happening, we also had NHL free agency happening just 2 days later. So really just no time off between the two things. The Rangers, with basically 17 cents in salary cap, somehow go out. And this is why Chris Drury sometimes, I feel like this fan base really gets on him a lot. But I thought he did a fantastic job with what he had in free agency. Obviously, the biggest signing coming in Blake Wheeler. The forward got bought out by the Winnipeg Jets 2 days before free agency, a day before, whatever it was. So a guy who kind of came out of nowhere on their radar. And I think the perfect right wing for this team. I mean, they need a right winger. And I know he's 36 years old, but he's got 15 years NHL experience. I mean, the guy's he had 55 points last year in 72 games. He is a point producer. He comes in, he can put up points, he can play power play. He's a big body in front of the net. Maybe he plays in the second unit in front of the net instead of Trocheck, and Trocheck may go back to the first unit this year. Don't know how that's going to work. But I think Wheeler's a great addition to this team. I know he's not the fastest guy in the world, and I think the Rangers need a little more speed in their lineup, so that doesn't help them at all. But I think all in all, to add him for $800K plus bonuses at the end of the year, perfect addition. Big 6'5", 220, could throw the body around a little bit, plays with his size, plays to the net. 922 career points. I think it's a great ad for the Rangers. Good friends with Jacob Trouba. I think it was perfect. Now the other guy you want to talk about, another veteran ad, Jonathan Quick. So obviously 3 Stanley Cup titles, just won a cup title as the backup for Vegas. We know what he's done with LA, beating the Rangers in this Cup Finals that 1 year. Just one of the most accomplished U.S. American goaltenders of all time, and was born and raised a Ranger fan. So pretty cool to see him come back. Mike Richter was his hero, so cool to see him come back now. There's concerns about what kind of player he's going to be now this late in his career, and obviously he didn't have a great year last year. We had Kevin Woodley on a couple weeks ago. We talked about the possibility of Quick joining the team, and he didn't think it was a great fit with Benoit there, so his style, but we'll see. I think, for what they brought him in at, it was a perfect contract for what they needed. I wanted to see Halak back personally, but maybe he was asking for too much money. I don't know what the deal with that was, but I think Quick is a good addition. Obviously, you still have Louis Domingue down in Hartford as your third goalie, who's obviously a capable goalie coming in if there is an injury, and either backing up Quick or coming in if Quick gets hurt to back up Igor. So all in all, you want Igor playing 65 games anyway, so Quick's not going to be out there a ton. But I think it was a good ad there. And then a couple other veteran ads here. Erik Gustafsson, I think, is a really solid defenseman and a guy who will play on that third pairing. Now the question is what happens with Ben Harper. He'll most likely go back to Hartford. Zach Jones has kind of been in that yo-yo between Hartford and New York the last couple of years. What is his deal? So I think Gustafsson might maybe platoon with Jones. I'm not really sure. But this guy can move the puck around. Last year he had 42 points. He was traded at the deadline to Toronto. Had a great year with the Caps. Obviously played for Laviolette there. And Laviolette apparently was a big fan of his. So I think he was a good ad. And I think the Rangers brought him in well under where his market value was. So that was positive. And Nick Bonino is a guy who I think the Rangers should have gotten a couple years ago. Another veteran, 2-time Stanley Cup champion, over 823 NHL games. Just watched him at the World Championships this last year. He was the captain of Team USA this last World Championship. So a guy who can kill penalties, good fourth liner, can win a big face-off. Like I said, has a ton of playoff experience and cup experience, over 105 playoff games in his career. So, and he's got 6 game-winning goals too. So the guy plays big in big situations. So I thought that was a good ad for his team. And another Stanley Cup champion, more of a depth guy in Riley Nash, but he was on the Lightning team, played 8 games in the playoffs a couple years ago for Lightning on their cup run. I think he's a guy who can maybe push for a roster spot, but probably be more of a Hartford player. Maybe be a 13th forward. He can play forward. He can play. Apparently, he can play anywhere. He can play center, left wing, right wing. So that's good. And Tyler Pitlick, another guy who I actually was impressed with when the Rangers played St. Louis this year. He only had 16 points in 61 games. Again, another fourth line type player. He has got limited playoff experience, 22 games there. But as a right winger, so another right winger adding to this depth now. Play a little offensively, can throw the body around. Now, this is a guy who has some speed, which is good. Can play center, can play wing. So we'll see. We'll see what he can do. And I like the ad with him. I think this is another depth guy, kind of similar to like a Jimmy Vesey type ad last year, where I don't think a lot's to be expected of him, but I think he can pleasantly surprise people when he comes in. So we'll see. We'll see what happens there. And then, they have a couple other ads here. Connor Mackey, another guy who I watched the World Championships this year, who I think could maybe push for some playing time, kind of be an injury insurance down in Hartford. I think he's a very solid player. Nicholas Brouillard, who has mostly been an AHL player his entire career. Had a good year this year in the Ducks organization. I think he's a guy obviously destined for Hartford. Mac Hollowell, who actually played, I thought he was a good sign, actually. 24 years old, so he's a young guy. He's played in mostly the AHL, but he also saw some NHL action last year. And actually, Steve Dangle actually talked about how impressed he was when he filled in for Toronto this year with some injuries. So, maybe he's a guy who can get a shot down the line. I think he played 6 games last year with Toronto, and he said in those 6 games was pretty impressive. He had a +3 rating and had 2 assists in his NHL debut, so that's pretty solid against the New Jersey Devils, which we know is a very good team last year. So we'll see. I think he's obviously a Hartford player, but you never know with injuries where these guys can go. And then Alex Belize, who had played for Montreal the last couple of years, again, more of a veteran player, was a captain for their AHL team last year. I see him more as an AHL player. I think some people think he has a shot at making the fourth line. I think kind of like Nash. He's going to be a guy that can maybe yo-yo up and down if they need him to, pace off injury, but mostly spend most of his days in Hartford. But, like I said, for a guy with very limited funds, I think Chris really did a very good job building some depth. And now the question is going to be, do they bring back? They have some cap space here. It's going to depend on what the deal with Lafreniere and Keandre Miller turns out to be on their restricted free agent deals. But, are they going to get rid of Goodrow? Are they keeping Barclay Goodrow? Can they bring back a Patrick Kane? Is he interested in coming back? What's the injury situation there? It looks like Tarasenko is destined for Carolina, although today has not gone through officially. So we'll see what actually happens there. But that'll be a big game for Carolina. It seems like the Metro is just getting better and better, the best division in hockey last year. And a lot of teams are gearing up for war again this year. So that'd be very unfortunate to see Tarasenko go to Carolina. I hope somehow that changes before the deal gets finalized, but he would be a great addition for them. But yeah, it seems like every team in the Metro has gotten better this last week. And then also big news for the Rangers is I think we reported 2 weeks ago that unfortunately Jacksonville Icemen announced they were leaving the Rangers organization as their affiliate, and they're going to be heading to Buffalo. And the Rangers actually just swapped affiliates. The Rangers are announcing Wednesday morning that they're picking up the Cincinnati Cyclones as their new East Coast Hockey League affiliate. They were previously with the Sabres, and they actually had the second best record in the East Coast League last year with 103 points. So they're picking up a very good Cincinnati team. Obviously, they'll add their own prospects there as well as the guys that are signed there. But head coach Jason Payne is one of the best coaches in the league. Every person I talked to about him has actually said how great of a guy he is. So hopefully we get him on the show like we've done in the past with the Maine and Jacksonville staffs. But The new affiliate for the New York Rangers in the East Coast level will be the Cincinnati Cyclones. Very cool logo. You go check that out. And everything I've heard about Cincinnati, actually, they have a great crowd and a great arena there. So looking forward to watching some of their games there, and hopefully the Rangers will bring a even bigger crowd to the town, as they usually do. I know in Jacksonville they brought their attendance to a new level once they got the Rangers in as an affiliate. So hopefully that works out well for Cincinnati as well. But as I said, we have a great guest this week, Steve Kournianos, the draft analyst, who comes on. We talk about all the Rangers draft picks. You'll learn guys that, the last late round guys I knew nothing about, and he gives some great breakdown of their games and what to expect from them. And really, Rasmus Larsson, who I had no idea the 5th round pick, he has a great review of him. So it was great to hear his insight. Before we do send our interview with Steve, I do want to tell you about sponsors over at InTheClutch.com. Listen, there's no place to go other than InTheClutch.com if you need your NFL, NHL, NBA, MLB apparel. They're the spot. They have throwback shirts. They have cool current shirts, player shirts, team shirts, city shirts. Anything you need to gear up for your next game, go there. When you do, use promo code Broadway to save 10% off on your purchase. So go to InTheClutch.com, use our code Broadway, and you save 10% on your purchase and get all the gear you need for your next sporting event, your next whatever you need in your life. Make sure you go check them out. They do amazing stuff. Go check out our Ranger gear there. And, and gear up for next season for the Rangers. It'll be here before you know it. Or if you're going on a Nashville for the NHL Draft, you want some Ranger gear to rep, go on InTheClutch.com, buy our shirt, use the promo code, save 10% off. That's promo code Broadway at InTheClutch.com.
All right, we're now joined again. Great to have him back on the show to talk about the NHL Draft. Some exciting stuff for the New York Rangers. Steve Kournianos from the Draft Analyst. You can find the Draft Analyst on Twitter. Thanks so much for joining us again, buddy.
What's going on, man? How you doing?
Good. Great to get you back on. I think Ranger fans are very excited about their first-round pick, Gabriel Perreault out of the U.S. National Development Program. And I watched him at the World Juniors, or the U18s, and loved him there. I actually talked about him on my pre-draft show about how much of a pipe dream it might be to get him. And sure enough, he's sitting there at 23 and the Rangers grab him.
Yeah, he was. He has the scoring record at the NTDP. I mean, he has a record that, he surpassed Austin Matthews and Jack Hughes and Eichel and Kane and all of them. He has that record, and so, you're getting offense out of him. He's just nothing but offense. I mean, that's all you're getting. You're not getting physicality. You're not getting, hard work in the defensive zone. You're not getting penalty killing. None of that. You're getting just pure offense. That's it. And, once he's inside the offensive zone, it's really his playground. And so I like the fact that they went for extreme skill. They haven't done that in a while with their picks, outside of obviously the high picks that they get. But usually they're like, oh, this guy's grit. This guy's got he's sandpaper, and he works hard. You're gonna love him. With this one, it's like you're just getting offense, scoring, offense, passing, playmaking, power play, everything.
I think that's something they need, right? I feel like there's enough guys that they have now, like the Offmans, that have a two-way game. Will Cooley can play physical. They need a guy who's just a pure scorer. And I think that's something they've missed in a couple of years.
Yeah. I mean, we all assumed that by this point, Kako and Lafreniere would be the two of the brightest young stars in the league, and they would have 30 goals and 60 points and at a minimum. But obviously it's been a work in progress. So, the fact that they had to move on from Kravtsov, that was a big disaster. And, when you look at your top six, I know people were like, oh, another wing. Well, Panarin isn't going to be, he's going to get old. He's going to become a free agent eventually. Kreider isn't getting any younger. Of course, he's under contract, but he's only got a couple of years left. And so you have to replace those guys. And I'm a big fan of trying to do that through the draft first. So in a way, you could say that this pick, the Othman pick, hitting on Cooley, and then Lafreniere and Kakko, like, in theory, that could be your first 6 wingers, like let's say 5 to 6 years down the road. I'm not saying it's going to work out that way because it never really does. But in theory, like I said, when you're trying to create your rosters of the future, you could say that, hey, like we're set at wing. We have finishers, we have playmakers, we have everything. We have big bodies, we got, tough guys. So now all we need to do is find centers. And that's we'll wait to see when that's going to happen at the draft with the Rangers. But when it comes to wing, it looks like they're definitely set. They might have arguably the best collection of wings under the age of like 23 in the entire league. I think it's that deep.
I was laughing at. I was reading about your pick. I know you gave the pick a B plus, and I think you're right. The Rangers are allergic to drafting centers. When I think Hedo's the last center I remember drafting that high. I can't remember the last center they actually drafted high in the draft.
Well, they drafted Anderson and Hedel with
same year.
Yeah, they went 1-2. And I understood that. Yeah, I didn't like the Anderson pick. Definitely didn't like that pick. But the Hedel pick, I was like, okay. I think what happened was in 2018, they were like, well, we have these 2 centers. Now let's go out and draft an elite wing. And so you get Kravtsov, and then just by circumstance, they win back-to-back lotteries, and you cannot draft anybody but a wing. You had to draft Kakko at 2. You had to draft Lafreniere at 1. So now you have this like a little bit of a conundrum now, because now you have 3 straight wings. This is my theory too. Like, then they saw the writing on the wall with Kravtsov, Kakko and Lafreniere a little slow out of the gate. So now they go and they draft Orthman, and then they go and they draft Sikora. So it's like this is all in a row. The Rangers have picked a winger with the first pick, and I think 7 out of the last 8 drafts, or it's been 6 straight drafts, which is crazy to think about when you're talking about building a team that's been weak at center for a very long time. It's been an organizational need, but again, they definitely addressed a need with the Perreault pick. I had him ranked, I think, exactly at that spot. I had him ranked 23, so he was my best player available. But just at some point, I'd like to see them really, like, you look at what Vegas does every year. You look at Montreal's one team. Like, they just go, Vegas especially. Vegas has drafted a center with their first pick every year. They've been in the draft since 2017, and they've never taken anything but a center with their first pick. So they used Krebs to get Eichel. They used Glass to get Glass was like the Nolan Patrick trade, so I don't know about that one, but they're like, yeah, I like having really good center depth. I'm a big fan of it. And let's not forget, like, the one cup this franchise has in the last 80 years is when they went out and they got a center who scored 70 goals, and then they traded him for one of the best centers in the history of the game. So I'd like to see them maybe put more of an emphasis on that position. The Trocheks, the Stepans, the Brassards, they're all fine. But I felt like, they really need to, at some point, address, like, we need a franchise center, like a 6'2", 200-pound, or a 6'1", 185, dual threat, penalty killer, physical, some guy like that. And if you look at all the recent Cup champions, just go all the way down the list. How many of them had a center you're like, oh, I don't know about that guy. He's okay. He's like a top 6 type. No, like, every team that's won a Cup has like a legit number 1 center. And so, it's one of those things. I was expecting them to address that this draft, so I was a little taken aback by the Perreault pick. But again, you're frustrated with the fact that you can't have guys like Panarin and Zibanejad not showing up in the playoffs and not scoring. Your 2 best players, like I said, Kreider's not getting any younger. Now we still don't really know what's going to happen with Lafreniere and Kakko. Have they peaked, or is this the best is yet to come? Who knows? So again, I like the pick. I think the kid, his touch inside the offensive zone is phenomenal. Like, he'll make like it's Panarin like. It's Panarin like. That's how skilled he is.
I mean, anytime you get compared to Panarin, that sounds good to me. But I think it's John Lilly, the director of scouting for the Rangers. I think he said, basically he was the number 1 guy on their list that was left, and they were kind of surprised he was still sitting there. So who knows? They could have had a completely different direction they were going in the draft, and that kid's still sitting there, and they probably I think saw Drury actually run up to the front to draft him. There was like no delay. There was no thanking David Poyle. There was nothing. Just straight say the kid's name and get up the stage.
Yeah, I like when they do that. Another thing too, another positive thing about why I'm definitely happy with the Perreault pick is because they didn't draft the 3 centers. I was praying that they were like, oh, he's a big body, he's a big boy. There were 3 guys I did not want them to take. I was dead set on it, and Minnesota took one at Stramel. They went. The Wild fans went nuts because this kid did not have a good year, and but he's a Minnesota kid. He's big and he could kill penalties. So Minnesota took him first, and then the other guy was Edstrom, and he went to Vegas. So I was happy that we avoided him. And then Danny Nelson went to the Islanders in the 2nd round, and there was talk that Edstrom and Nelson and Stramel were in the mix because they would be Ranger type players, good penalty killers, good on faceoffs, physical. And I'm like, no more of that. No more. No, we need a playmaking center or a dual threat, or it's just some guy that has presence. So when Stramel went, I was very happy. And then when they announced Perreault, I had the same reaction I had with Othman. Like, okay, not the guy necessarily that I wanted, but it's a good pick. You know what I mean? And so the thing about Perreault, listen, we have to be fair here. We can't make him out to be the next Yari Curry or something like that. This guy, he definitely has limitations. My only concern with Perreault, I actually have 2 concerns. My first concern is that, and this view, I'd say that's a stupid way to look at it. But again, this is how my brain works. I can't help it. His brother was almost an identical player, Jacob. And he was drafted he played for the Sarnia Sting in 2020. He was drafted in the 1st round, right around the same spot by Anaheim. And his thing was elite shot, elite hands, great skater. And he has just struggled in the AHL. Now, this was a kid drafted 3 years ago now. So he's had, I think, 3 seasons, and each one has been a struggle. So that's a little concerning. But then again, you look at William Nylander versus Alex Nylander. So again, I look at both sides, but still something to think about. But the biggest thing that I'm concerned about with him is that he's had the same line mates for like 2 years, right? And he's going to have the same line mates again in Boston College. So like you're playing on the same line with the same, like the chemistry that line had was phenomenal. Like they were just dancing out on the ice, making phenomenal plays, just a high-end skill. Like I said, it was almost like the Russian 5 or the Red Army teams or the Gretzky Oilers, where they're really just toying with the opposition. And they did this against the college teams, did it against the international team, did it against everybody. What's going to happen is when they all leave BC, Smith is going to go to San Jose, Leonard is going to go to Washington, and Perreault is going to go to the Rangers. And I'm wondering how much of an impact this is going to be. And then his first year in the AHL, not having that familiarity. And again, this is all worst case scenario. Is he going to, like, he's a smaller player. He's not very big. So if he's not like scoring, he's going to get frustrated. And then of course the fans are going to chime in, and, you have this vicious cycle, it seems, that we've had with our prospects that, look at Brett Howden. He was a prospect. He was a serviceable guy, and people went nuts because he was taking the 4th line job over Elias Anderson, and Elias Anderson was, so I think with prospects, it's a slippery slope sometimes because we all love them. But the second they don't meet our expectations, not the club's expectations, our expectations, we call them a bust and whatever. So it's something to monitor, right? You got to see how he progresses. Maybe Boston College, I know that their goal is to win and make money. So I don't think they'd break up that line, but I'd like to see him play away from that line. I'd like to see what he can do by himself with like 2 random guys, like a regular center and a regular, because that was not the case with him for each of the last 2 years, outside of a couple of games here and there. So like I said, just things to monitor, but he has the kind of shot and the accuracy and the vision he has. It's going to require his teammates, I think, to adapt to him instead of him to adapt to the teammates. I hope that's the case. because I think that's the kind of skill that he has.
All right, those are two things to watch out for there. And listen, I think Ranger fans, we've seen the highlights of him. Everyone's just very excited. Now, the reason why I love talking to you is everything. You know guys that in all different parts of the world that no one ever heard of. So I want to talk about the rest of the other 4 picks that
Sure.
I had to get your input on. And a guy who I do know, and I actually was hoping they would get drafted. I talked about him on my pre-show as well, was Drew Fortescue, the defenseman also from the U.S. development program, who, again, I really liked at the U18s. I watched him too. I think he's a big, strong defenseman that's very good in his defensive zone and was a plus-minus, 8 up plus-minus this year, was great, the world champion. What do you think of him?
Yeah, I like the pick. I had the TV on mute because it's day 2 and I don't want to hear what they have to say. And I have to, I'm like banging out like my reports and everything, like real time. So when there was a delay, I was happy because I'm like, oh, I get to catch up, so I was happy with that. But I didn't see what they gave up to move up that one spot. I know it was a pick. I think it was a pick in next year's draft or
7th round pick. Yeah, 7th round pick next year.
All right, that's fine. They must have had in either intel that Pittsburgh was gonna grab him, or I don't know how that worked out. They'll never admit what the truth really was. But again, I don't have a problem making that kind of a move for that kind of a player because he's a good skater. He's got good size and he really could clean things up in the defensive zone. And a lot of the Rangers defensemen, I thought the defense, and again, I'm not, obviously this kid is nowhere near ready and he's going to go to BC as well. Reactionary drafting sometimes isn't a bad thing in the middle to late rounds. And so I think my opinion with Fox's Norris nomination notwithstanding, I think the defense played all that great last year. I'm talking about the Rangers defense. There were a lot of like I thought Trouba was the best, most consistent guy, which is crazy because usually he drives me nuts. But like we saw Miller had growing pains. Fox was not the same player, at least defensively. Lindgren dealing with injuries. So, and then Schneider, I thought also was more unreliable, I guess, than I expected. But a lot of it had to do with the expectations being high, and it's still a very young defense. So I like, if you want to go out and draft a defenseman who's just clean in his own zone, handles passes really well, and knows how to kickstart an offense without doing a whole lot, right? You don't want him to do a home run breakout pass every time. You don't want him to go end to end every time. You want him to be able to handle a puck under pressure and make one little play, deep in his own zone. That's going to, a forward could help him out. And then there's your breakout. And then you're out of harm's way. So Fortescue was great. The other thing about the stats with him, I think he actually had decent numbers. The NTDP defensemen are almost instructed, like give the puck, unless you have a Quinn Hughes or an Adam Fox, they're instructed to just give the puck to the forwards. And I can't tell you how many times the defensemen would basically have a clear lane to skate and exit on their own, and they wouldn't do it. They would just give it to a forward. So within that context, you would say, well, that's how Fortescue got his points. He actually got a lot of his points from shooting and making nice plays in the offensive zone. So I think there's definitely upside with point production there. But he could be physical. You have him out there on the penalty kill. And on top of that, he's a BC guy. He's going to go to college and be there for a little bit, then go to Hartford. So we got a ways to go with him. Felt like they needed to address the left side of the defense because really either side, the left side or the right side, because all they have on the right side is the Mancini kid and I think Emberson. If you talk about like legitimate prospects, and then on the left side, Jones and Robertson, they're ready. But after that, you have Shellberg. He's in, I think, I don't even know if they're going to bring him back because he's in college. And then they have to, I think his rights expire soon. And Kempf is another, he's just like a defensive defender. So they don't really have a whole lot. So I like the fact that they added a quality body, that there's a sizable gap between Jones and Robertson and because they're from the same draft year, and Fortescue. So it's not like you have to worry about Fortescue, let's say, blocking one or Jones or Robertson blocking him. because it's a wide gap. It's about a 4 or 5 year spread age wise. So yeah, just the pick made sense. You're only giving up a 7th to move up to get him. It's probably going to be a low 7th anyway. So let's go ahead and make the deal, and they did. And I think it was a good trade.
Yeah, and I like.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I like the pick too. I think it was a solid pick for where they were there. A kid who in the 3rd round you really get into. It's a lottery. It's like a lottery ticket. The kid works out or not, but I think he's got a good shot at making some kind of an impact in the organization.
Yeah.
Now we get to the later rounds, and here's a kid I have no idea, never heard of him before. Rasmus Larsson, 6'3" Swedish defenseman. What do you got on him?
He's good. He's good.
Okay, good.
Yeah, he's good. He's a. I don't want to call him a unicorn. I'm trying not to get too excited about it because it was the J20 in Sweden, and although this year was a good year for Swedish prospects, the J20 is a little bit of an offensive, run and gun kind of league. So I try to not get too excited because they definitely don't play the way they play in Major Junior. They don't play there the way that they play in Hockey East or in the USHL. It's just different. It's not like an easy league. It's a bigger sheet though, and so you just have more room to skate. There's more offense, and they call anything is a penalty. You breathe on someone, it's a penalty. So you have a lot of power play time, and it kind of muddies the waters when you're assessing a prospect. But with Larsson, he was basically the number 1 defenseman on a, and he's only in 04, I think. So he's only an overager by a year. He is basically, like I say, he's like a 4th forward. He's a big guy. He's a beautiful skater, multi directional flexibility, agility, clean stride. I mean, he could, he's kind of like what we thought Brady Shea was going to be, when Brady Shea with his skating and his size. And we rarely saw that. We saw that in spurts where Shea could be an offensive guy who takes over a game. So based on what I've seen at the J20 level, Larsson takes over games. He is he doesn't just take it over in the offensive zone. He takes it over in the defensive zone as well. He's a hard hitter. He's got, like I said, a powerful lower body. He's got a long reach. He breaks up plays. He, if he's defending the slot and something's in the corner, he doesn't hesitate. He just goes and he nails the guy, and then he goes right back. And because he has speed, really good footwork and quick feet, he can do that. So I saw that he's going to the USHL next season, and he's going to play for either Cedar Rapids or Green Bay. I always get those two, it's either Cedar Rapids or Green Bay. I think it might even be Green Bay. Yeah, it is Green Bay, actually. So that means that he's probably going to go to college. All right. Why would he turn down a pro contract?
Yeah, I think he committed to Northern Michigan for 2024.
All right. So he's going to Northern Michigan, not a major program, but a decent one. I think is that the CCHA or that's the NCHA? Anyway, I forgot. But the thing is with the USHL is it's going to mirror what he sees in the USHL and then ultimately in college hockey. It's going to mirror what he's going to see in the AHL. And that's what you want. I always said people always talk about, these 6th-round picks or 5th, they never go to the NHL. I don't think that the intent is to get them to the NHL. The intent should be to get them to the AHL. Because once you get them to the AHL and they realize that they're literally one step away from the NHL and all that big money, which is at the end of the day, it's what we all want, that these kids it'll make or break these kids, right? We've seen plenty of Ranger prospects drafted from any round, like Elias Anderson, right? He is phenomenal in the AHL. He's like an AHL all-star every year. I saw he just got picked up by Montreal, by the way. Yeah. And so I think, but with the NHL, he can do it. But even still, Elias Anderson every now and again gets a couple of call-ups here and there. And I think that's what the players want. And, when a player is finally drafted, it's almost like, you're hired by a law firm or you're hired by, a big company. They're going to want to you're an investment. They're going to walk you through. They're going to reveal secrets to you. They're going to tell you a whole bunch of stuff. And on top of that, you're going to be part of their player development. They're going to kind of fine tune you year by year. They're going to mentor you. You'll have advisors, you'll have dietitians and physical stuff that you never had before, or not, definitely not on the level you've had before. And what we hear about the Rangers organization. It's one of the best in the hockey. Like, people like to be an employee of that organization, you get treated like gold. And so what I want is like a kid like Larsson. He's going to go to the USHL, and not that he he needs to work on his physicality, because he does. He's like 6'2", 200. He skates like the when he hits. But he's going to go to USHL, go to college, Hartford. It's all going to be so as long as he's down in Hartford and he's playing, 40 to 50 games or 60 games a year, and he's making it difficult for, notable prospects, he's been making them earn their jobs, I'm all for it. So I would definitely see this guy being in the AHL one day, at a minimum being in the AHL.
All right, that's good. I knew nothing about him. And the Rangers kept the trend going with the big guys. I think the big 6'7" center from Oshawa, Dylan Roobroeck.
Roobroeck, yeah.
Roobroeck, yeah.
Yeah, so he's an interesting study. So he's an overage too by a year. He wasn't a high OHL priority pick. I think he was like a 3rd round pick. So he had fairly high expectations when Oshawa drafted him. I think when they did draft him, they were in contention mode, or maybe it was the 21 season where they didn't have one. But I think like Oshawa's always been a big time program, but there was like a rebuild kind of like on the horizon. They could sense it. So they were drafting like these really high profile OHL kids, like Callum Ritchie's one of them. Not Carson Rico, what's his name? Seneca. He was eligible for next year's draft. So Roobroeck was part of this like 2 or 3 year like draft classes where they saw them as the future of the team. So Roobroeck is an offensive guy. I mean, he's not just offense, but he has skill. He could center his own line. He could run it. He could be a good setup guy, etc. So he had that reputation. His first year with Oshawa, wasn't all that great. But it was like a learning experience. Okay, you're a rookie. Don't fine. Next year is going to be a big year. So of course he gets passed over at the draft. He comes into this season and he has a very good season. All right, so he's basically their 2nd line center behind Callum Ritchie, the kid who went like 27th, whatever, to Colorado, and a kid I wanted the Rangers to take. But anyway, so Callum Ritchie was the number 1 center, and Roobroeck was the 2nd line center. So obviously the Rangers were probably scouting Ritchie because he was going to be in that range, and they saw Roobroeck play. And he, like I said, big kid, skates really well for his size, soft hands, offensively inclined, also physical. He kills penalties, about 51% on faceoffs. So you're getting a 200-foot center. The thing is, though, is that once the games got tough, like, so Oshawa was bad this year, but so too were like a couple other teams in that conference, and Kingston being one of them. And so Kingston, this is crazy. If this happened in the NHL, it'd be like front page news. Kingston and Oshawa were fighting for the only remaining playoff spot in the conference, right? And so what happened was everybody knew, everybody else was set. It was almost like the East a couple of years ago where everyone clinched the playoffs by like January, except for like Washington. It was a similar situation like that. And what happened was, so there's like 25 games left in the season. And so you knew, and Kingston and Oshawa would just lose every night. No one. So it's like they were separated by 1 point in, let's say, like, late February, mid-February, and they were separated by like 1 or 2 points on the last game of the season. So the point I'm making is that these were like playoff games. Every game was a playoff game, and these teams were losing and losing horribly. Like, it's like no one wanted to take the spot. And then I think, just to show you, like, sum it up, on the second to last game of the season, Kingston lost, so they were eliminated, and the clinching game for Oshawa was a 10-2 loss. So it was just really weird. Anyway, so Roobroeck, when I was watching him, and I was paying attention to this mayhem in the OHL, I'd be like, "What are you, nuts? You care about the 2 worst teams?" I'm like, "I don't care. It's a good story." So I'm watching. So I watch Roobroeck, and I'm like, he's got to step up, especially because Callum Ritchie got hurt. Callum Ritchie played the last month of the season with like a torn labrum or something like that. And so, or the whole season with a torn labrum. And so Callum Ritchie is out, and the team needs to, step up. And he stepped into that top line role. I don't think he was real more like a 2C. He would like play about 20 minutes a night. So I guess between a 1C and a 2C. But anyway, he really didn't show up. Like, he showed up in effort, but he was not making plays. And the thing that I noticed was he's got a great shot, but he misses the net a ton. He'll get so many looks. He's a great he's a very good stick handler. So he could, maneuver himself, his big body, he can maneuver himself into the middle of the ice and get open looks. But even on the power play too, this kid misses the net a ton. So now they go into the playoffs, and they're not favored. They're playing Ottawa. It was a 1-8. The 67s were the best team in the league that year. But I think if I recall correctly, Oshawa won the first or the second game, so they gained home ice, and he just wasn't a factor. So he wasn't a factor late in the season. He wasn't a factor in the playoff series. So I think that's probably why he went in the 6th round, because if he had like a really good showing as a number 1 center, or he just basically like took the pressure off of Callum Ritchie, because Ritchie did come back eventually in late March, that you would say, wow, like, this is a kid that, he's an overager, but still, like, he followed the right, he took the right path. Like, he went from being insignificant to significant. But, there were a bunch of prospects this year who did not play well in their team's playoffs. And we can't hand wave that. We can't just say, oh, that's no big deal, because that could be something that's, we know this. They could stick with a player their entire career. It stuck with Mike Gardner his entire career, and he wasn't even really that bad. He's a Hall of Fame guy, one of the greatest goal scorers in the history of the game. But the knock on him, Steve Yzerman as well, in the beginning of his career, where it was like, yeah, they're either not winning or they're not elevating their game or doing what was expected out of them. So, it's not that big of a deal. The team was going to lose anyway, but it was just an observation that I made, with, watching how everything progressed. But all that said, you still have like a complete center. Like, he's 6'6", 6'7", whatever he is, and he does it all. Outside of the inaccuracy, he could be a guy that drives a line.
Okay. And the last guy they took, another big winger, 6'5", 205 pounds, Ty Henricks out of the USHL. I love this kid's junior stats. He's a big-time goal scorer.
Yeah, he could score. He's got a heck of a shot. The thing is, he's not a good skater, so I'm just going to put that out there. But he's physical. He's got good size, really soft hands. And a couple of times that I watched him, I saw him. Now, when you look at like a USHL rookie, he's an 05 too. So he might even be like a summer 05. So he like just turned 18. And so that, playing on a team like, I think it was Muskegon, they were good this year. They had, Mellenbacher and a bunch of NHL draft picks on it. When he would get the puck in the defensive zone, he would skate it out, and he would make moves skating it out. So it's not just the shooting and the scoring. And again, he was not scoring garbage goals. He was sniping pucks. Now, of course, he had a lot of looks as well, and he's got to work on his accuracy. But he's a nice, like, long-term project to have. I think he's going to go to Western Michigan, and Western Michigan, I believe Andy Murray's still coaching there. They've always been known as, like, a very tough opponent, almost like the Bruins, where like every game, win or lose, you're going to get bruised. So he definitely, Henricks definitely offers that, the physical aspect. He's got the size, but like I said, you look at the 3 kids that they took after the higher round picks, they make sense to me. Like, there's skill there. So I know that, we want to say, well, they got a skill guy in Perreault, and that's enough. Like, everybody in the draft class has skill. Like, they were a top line center or a number 1 defenseman, or they were able, even because Henricks didn't play all that much. I think he was like a bottom 6 wing. But even in these limited minutes, he was able to showcase his skill. And you got to figure that once the 20 and 21-year-olds move on, that a guy like Henricks will be a top line wing, top power play, etc. So We've seen this trend now with the Rangers in each of the last 3 Drury drafts, is he doesn't want like just big bodies. Like even a guy like Mancini had, when I watched him in junior hockey in Sweden, he had like, he was on the power play. He had soft hands. So yeah, there's a couple of guys in the system who don't really have that kind of ability. And there's no guarantee that any of these kids in the later rounds are going to hit. But again, like in terms of like the draft strategy, what Drury wanted to accomplish with limited resources, by the way, I thought he accomplished it.
Well, Steve, thank you so much for your wealth of knowledge and helping us understand these draft picks. I'm now more excited with the Larsson kid than I was because I didn't know anything about him, but I like the fact that you're very high on him. And who knows? I mean, these 2 big body guys in the 6th round, they turn into something with some development. I think Perreault obviously has got Ranger fans very excited. So Thank you for coming on as always. And I guess in 365 days, we'll talk to you again.
Yeah, I'll be around.
Thank you so much, Steve, for joining us this week. It's always great to get him on the show. I know we took a year hiatus last year because he's a very busy man, but it was great to get him back on and to hear about all these draft picks in the future. And obviously, I'm very excited about Perreault. I think he's pretty excited about Perreault. And you got to keep in mind, these kids need 3-4 years of developing college before they come up, and that could be instant superstars. So, like he said, you got to table some expectations for them. There could be some growing pains here, but all in all, I think an exciting draft for the Rangers. And even some late-round pick guys, I think there's some positives there too. So they're all skill guys. Like he said, they're all plus skill. Got some size there in the back end. So, yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited for this draft, and I want to thank Steven. And make sure you go check him out on Twitter at the Draft Analyst. Always got great stuff, always great insight. And he's wrapping up his full draft recap of every pick. So even if you're not a Ranger fan, go on there and check it out. He'll have your teams on there. He'll have pick 2 whatever, on there, and he'll give you an analysis on what that player is going to be. So I cannot thank him enough for taking time because he's a very busy man, especially around this time of the year. And so between the draft and free agency, it's now going to go into a little bit of a summer lull here. So I wish they would have spread it out a little more, but a very exciting week of hockey. And make sure you go and follow the show on all social media, on Facebook and Instagram at the Broadway Hat Podcast. You could find the show on Twitter and my personal Twitter account there as well. My show at the Broadway Hat Pod, my personal account at KHallNY for all New York Ranger updates. Make sure you go subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts. Leave us a 5-star review there. Every 5-star review, the show does receive $1. It's donated to Alex Lehman Foundation. So please go on there, leave a 5-star review. It takes 1 minute out of your time and help an amazing company fight pediatric cancer. Make sure you go and subscribe to the show on Google Play, on Pandora, on Spotify. Leave us a 5-star review there. On Amazon Music. Anywhere you get your podcast, you can find us there. And thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next week.